You are listening to Action Design, your monthly insight into the field of behavioral economics and its applications to the world around us. We bring you leading practitioners from all industries to discuss cutting-edge behavioral research and how to practically apply those concepts to the development of consumer products and public policy.
All right, hello, and welcome to another episode of Action Design Radio. I'm your host, Zarak Khan, and with me for the very first time on microphone is producer Zach Simon. Zach, you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So I have had the honor of being involved with Action Design for a few years now. I've been co-running the Action Design chapter here in Chicago. Of course, been working on the podcast for the last year or so with you and Eric. You and Eric have been sort of the hosts. I've been kind of producing on the back end, doing the audio engineering, writing up the descriptions, all the really fun grunt work that you guys don't want to do while you're talking to all these super interesting behavioral scientists and practitioners and such. But I am very excited to finally be getting on the air and joining in on the fun conversations, and very excited to have with us Jeff Kreisler here today.
Yeah, so Jeff, thank you for joining us. Jeff is actually, we are coworkers. We're colleagues in addition to this different power dynamic of podcast host and podcast guest. But we both work together.
And Zach and I have been, I was going to jump in and say, Zach and I have been in an improv workshop together. So it's like we're just one big, happy, awkward family.
And it does feel that way.
Yeah, we had the pleasure of doing one of Kelly Leonard's second science project improv classes last week here in Chicago. Kelly Leonard was our guest last month on the podcast, and he of course is doing the partnership between the Center for Decision Research at the University of Chicago, partnering with Second City, using behavioral science and improvisational techniques to combine and give opportunities to use those sorts of skills and develop new ways in the workplace. So it was really interesting. Jeff, what was your just impression of how that improv class goes? Because you're, of course, the person with the professional comedy background. I was very interested to hear your thoughts about how that went for you.
Well, I think the most important lesson I got out of it is now I have found that with the help of someone like Zach Simon, I'm able to run this experiment where I totally derail any introduction that Zarak might have about who I am.
Oh, no, I'm being called out for that.
I don't believe in credentialization or anything. Your listeners don't have to know who I am. They can just
We're getting to that.
Google it. Yeah, Action Designers, Google it. And then for now, we'll just go with we're rolling right into it. How was the improv, guys?
The improv. It was good. It was interesting for me. It was sort of, I've taught improv in addition to doing comedy, and I worked many times, like literally around the corner from where Second City is in Chicago. And then I have this interest in behavioral science, which your listeners will find out by going on to Bing and finding me.
Bing it.
Yeah, exactly. Bing it. Is that a thing? It should be. It was fascinating because, they go around early and they're like, how do you know? Why are you here? And I really was hesitant to say, well, I know about improv and I know about behavioral science, because I didn't want to then be like the guy that asked
too much pressure.
It seemed like too much pressure to be awesome, which I usually fail to live up to. But besides that, my own personal thing, it was an interesting process, and I applaud Kelly for doing it, because I've wanted to look at the intersection of comedy and behavioral economics a lot, and a few people tried, like Peter McGraw out in Colorado. He studies it. I ran an experiment with Dan Ariely that showed no results because it was poorly designed, and it's always been fascinating to me. I mean, I could go on forever about comedians. Like the traditional Seinfeld comedian goes, hey, did you ever notice people do the stupid thing? And that is my Seinfeld impression. Hey, did you ever notice people do the stupid thing? And then
we're combining Seinfeld with Tony Soprano here.
Master of impressions.
Yeah, normally he becomes Jackie Mason, but Anyway, so comedians always point out the stupid thing. Behavioral economists explain why we do the stupid thing. And so it feels like it's a natural fit. And so I'm curious and eager to see what the work that Kelly and others do down that road and maybe jump in on it myself. So I liked it is the long answer. And now I stop.
So which one did you start with? You started with comedy and then found your way to behavioral science?
Yes. This is my origin story. And
Yes.
I don't know if I interrupted the introduction before you got.
No,
to,
I believe it was me who interrupted the introduction.
No,
So Zarak was about to talk about how you two work together. So why don't we talk about that? And
Well,
then
we kind of planned this from the beginning, was that I would start and then Zach would jump in and then you would jump in and then we would come back to this later. So this was kind of how we had planned it out the whole time.
Yeah, it was perfectly planned.
Just tell me whenever you start recording. Tell me when we're going to start. Go ahead.
Well, I think
anyway,
yeah, go ahead. I think we should go linearly. We should start with your origin story.
Yes, and we'll get to who I am now, which is me. The origin story, which is something that I want to have for many people in behavioral science on peoplescience.com, which we will get to. My origin story is that I'm trying to decide how far back to go. I went to Princeton for undergrad, and I studied economics with, like, Ben Bernanke was my 102, Econ 102 teacher, and Alan Blinder and all these other old white dudes. And I got it. Like, I got the best education you could, and I understood it, but it didn't really click for me. It didn't have that human element. I think about that old, it's like sort of street joke. A street joke as this might be, where a geologist, a physicist, and an economist are on a desert island, and they just have a can of food, and they have no way to open it. And the physicist says, let's rub it on the ground, and it'll pop open. The geologist says, let's smash it with a rock. And the economist goes, let's just assume we have a can opener. And to me, that like just highlights the flaw of traditional economics, that it's not practical. It doesn't deal with reality, or it didn't for me. So I had my first taste of economics then I went to law school, which is what you do when you don't know what you're doing with your life, because I wanted to study how words help people interact and build societies and make decisions. And then because I got that degree, I decided to become a stand-up comedian. And I
very
did
traditional
a lot
approach.
of comedy for a while, and totally. After law school, became a comedian. Related, as I was saying, why do we do stupid things? And so Dan had me come to his classes at Duke and talk about cheating. The time I did it as this character, like Jim Cramer meets Stephen Colbert, and he did introduce me as a comedian. He just said someone with unique wealth-building ideas, and I would go and I would give them this whole routine I did about, there's no cost-benefit analysis, right? Because no one gets caught, and you can make millions, and it's a whole long thing. But anyway, about halfway through, someone would always ask, are you full of crap? And I'd put it to the class, what do you think? And inevitably, about a third of the class of Duke graduate business students would think, yeah, you got a point. Cheating sounds legit. And I don't mean to disparage those students, but for me, it became this light bulb moment, because everything that I had worked on was sort of observational and common sense and like a little research. But suddenly my whole feeling that, money messes with our heads and makes us make bad choices and immoral choices was validated, not just by these students raising their hand, but then by learning about the work that Dan had done and his peers had done, particularly around money initially. But then in other areas, how, our decision-making process isn't as clean as we would hope that it would be. That things like emotions would come into play. Like in my routine, I would get people all emotional and excited about all the cool shit they could buy. Like you can buy a giraffe or a Fabergé egg omelet or whatever other crazy stuff I discovered. And it just was like, wow, I hadn't really even known about this field. And then suddenly I sort of landed with one of the leaders in it, and his work and his peers. And that was my aha moment, and how I became interested in it. And then I got my superpowers when I was bitten by a radioactive Ariely, who invited me over wine. I was working on a TV show, and the network I was working for got sold, And we were just having a glass of wine one time, and I told him, so he's like, what are you going to do next? I'm like, I don't know, I'll figure it out, because I obviously never had a career path. And he said, do you want to write a book with me? And he just didn't have time to write this book about consumer spending, or he thought I was awesome. And so I wrote that book, and that came out last fall, Dollars and Cents. And it's done fairly well. And as the book was approaching, we're coming to the present. Don't worry, you can ask another question soon. As the book publication approached, I wanted to build on the momentum that I knew I would have publishing with Dan. And I had become a genuine convert to behavioral economics and the potential to change that it provided. And I was looking for a platform, and I thought about doing a podcast, but as you know, podcasts are just stupid. I don't know what you're doing here.
Don't even know what that is.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a video thing without the video.
Sounds great.
I got the opportunity. It does. I would listen to them, but I'm bored by them. I got the opportunity to work on people science, which is what my main focus is now. And people science is a website or a content platform that really discusses the potential and the challenges of applying behavioral science. Not really just in the consumer spending, which is what my book was about. In fact, there's very little about that, but more sort of organizationally within what we call the modern marketplace. And what's fascinating to me is that we're sort of at this moment where, as I'm sure your listeners know, behavioral science, I feel like it's a sort of tipping point, to use another common phrase. Thaler won the Nobel Prize, and people are paying more attention. And I feel like the early adopters have been healthcare and finance and sort of like marketing type companies and industries. And now I think people are starting to grow and see where can behavioral science be applied to like employee engagement and incentives and habits that aren't just buying habits, but healthy habits. So the website and what I'm working on now is building on all of those superpowers to try to help behavioral science be more broadly accepted and understood and put to the use of saving the world. The end.
Fantastic.
Now, if there was video, your listeners could see me smiling.
Yeah, well, all this podcast, the video without the video.
No.
But no, that was fantastic. Zarak, did you want to go back to the beginning a little bit? Because I feel like Jeff's journey from comedy to behavioral science is just such a unique path from any of our other guests that we've had on. So I know that Zarak and I were just curious about, some of your, best shows. Whether you mentioned that you had performed here at Zanies in Old Town in Chicago, years ago, when we were at Second City. And I know from, your book, Get Rich Cheating, you had worked on, for Comedy Central, Indecision 2008. Did you ever think that you would, end up here as a thought leader in behavioral science?
No, I never thought that was.
Could you imagine yourself doing anything 10 years or 20 years in the future?
Well, that's a fair point. Yeah.
No, I when I started, I figured by this point I'd be retired and on my fourth or fifth wife. As my friend Arj Barker used to say, a very funny comedian on stage, he'd be like, "Look, with any luck, my second wife hasn't even been born yet." But that is creepy and inappropriate. So that's actually not true. The reason why I'm not successful as just a comedian is I didn't get in it to be famous or rich. I got in because I wanted to disappoint my parents. Because I had something to say. I wanted to help people learn and understand. Comedy is pretty awesome. I'm not really sure how to answer the question without taking 20 years of your life, as I've taken 20 years of my life. Zanies is a great club. It's very old school stand-up comedy. It's like a long, dark room. It's actually haunted, I'm pretty sure. There's a random table halfway through the room on the left side by the wall that you can't hear anything. For some reason, there's a dead audio zone. It makes no sense to me. The stand-up comedy is, you have to, you speak of behavioral science and playing with emotion. Stand-up comedy, you have to trigger a very specific emotion. You have to get an emotional response from your audience every few seconds. It's incredible. To get someone to laugh requires really a really focused push on a very specific button. I didn't set out to take a scientific approach to it, but I think I did. I had some success. Obviously, not so much that we're having this conversation on my private jet, but show business is a stupid industry.
Well, you obviously didn't take your own advice to get rich cheating.
I did not. See, this is the problem. Okay, talk about the origin story. I now have a law degree, so I know how to think and argue like a lawyer. I've written a book about cheating. I understand behavioral science. I'm a comedian, so I can sort of excuse anything. By all rights, I should be able to get away with anything. But I can't lie. It's not like I'm George Washington, but I can't maintain a lie long enough to run a scam, and it pisses me off. By all rights, I know how to walk. I'm in my co-working space. I know how to walk out of here right now and basically convince everyone to give me all of their money. But I just can't do it because I'd crack myself up in the middle of doing it. Sucks.
Yeah, I mean,
it's like a Greek tragedy.
It is.
Well, one of my favorite lines from that book was that you were pointing out just how long, lying, cheating, and stealing and, being unethical and corrupt has been around, by pointing out that it started with the Lord creating heaven and earth by working for 6 days and submitting an invoice for 7.
Yes. That was the earliest example of how work incentives would provide for poor outcomes. And that was the most recent example of stretching a metaphor to try to make a joke.
So obviously there's this interplay between, at least in your life, between comedy and behavioral science. You kind of started with comedy and moved to behavioral science, but have you seen one sort of affecting the other more? Do you borrow from each of them? I mean, I've seen you give several talks, all of them, of course, fantastic, and where, people afterwards always, comment on how funny they are, but you're obviously still bringing a lot of really good behavioral content. I've seen the comedy show up in your behavioral stuff, but do you sort of see it happening the other way as well, where you've learned things from behavioral science and then you apply to your comedy?
Yes, I see it going in both directions. And when I think about my career, which I try not to do because I don't have time to cry, I know that there's
everybody has time to cry.
That's the new. Everyone loves Jell-O pudding. Anyway, look, there's always. The point is, what I try to do is use humor to sort of break down people's inhibitions to talking about or learning about topics that are either uncomfortable or difficult or hard to access, whether it's been politics or money or savings or behavioral science. It's just a way to sort of get people comfortable, to get them disarmed. I mentioned briefly that I'd tried to run an experiment with Dan about the effectiveness of humor, Dan Ariely. And it was a hastily designed thing. It didn't work, but it's an area that really is interesting to me because I found anecdotally, when you do get people to laugh, they sort of let down their guard, they open up emotionally, they trust you, and they at least will listen. And on a scientific level, the question is, okay, then is there retention of the knowledge you impart, and then is there action and change decision making based upon that? And there are studies about all of that, and overall they're inconclusive, leaning towards yes, comedy is effective, but there haven't been a lot of studies. I mean, it's really hard to study humor because it's so subjective. How do you measure, hey, we have a funny joke. How do you react to a funny joke when everybody thinks what's funny is different? Anyway, I'm sort of rambling, but my point is that I've used humor, even when I didn't know that I was, as a sort of behavioral tool to get people to listen and hopefully understand more and potentially make change.
And for the experiment that you guys were running, were you focused on sort of individually? So you're talking with one person, and if you can get them to laugh, you can get them to kind of go along with more of what you are thinking or opening up more, as opposed to, you're on stage or you're talking to a group of people and you can kind of get a group of people bought in. Because I feel like people laugh very differently sort of one-on-one as opposed to in a group.
Yeah, it was even worse than that. It was an online thing where I wrote jokes that sort of explained why you should save more for retirement. and then people read them, and then they made retirement decisions. And so it was like just a screen. It was just like there was no interaction. I mean, it was just, in retrospect, designed to fail because, the 5 people who ran the jokes by thought they were funny, but like it just doesn't work in that context. And a live interaction, particularly with a greater audience, would have more impact. And I would think to try to replicate or something like that, if I had a funny presentation about retirement savings, which I sort of do in my talk sometimes, and then like right after there was an opportunity for people to take some action, that might be an effective way, to have that change.
I've seen it also with like the company Digit, the saving company. Sometimes they'll send out at like certain milestones, or if they're asking you to do something. They've only done it like once or twice, actually. Maybe it was just like a thing they tested and it didn't work, but they would send out like a little GIF of something kind of funny, and they were like, "Oh, like congratulations!" And this little thing kind of meant to make you laugh a little bit. Yeah. I could see that as like somewhat similar, although it's not exactly a joke, but sort of meant to elicit more of an emotional response than just sort of like a congrats email or something like that.
Yeah, it's such a challenge when it's not face-to-face or even faced a group of faces, because you never know what emotional state people are in at the moment when you try to deliver a piece of humor or a funny GIF, or like really what their own relationship is with money. Because like people, whether it's money or other topics, like people can just be so emotional about that, right? They don't want to joke. It's not funny to people. It's stressful. So if you send it out to 1,000 users of an app, you never know what state they'll be in when they receive it. Right. Whereas at least when I'm giving a talk or doing a show, like I can feel their reaction. I can sort of I can prime them, if you will, the few minutes of just being funny on whatever, and then I can I can really sense that.
So how do you translate that? How do you translate that to like people science? Like, so you're running a website, you're producing content, you're sending out, a newsletter, you've got social media channels. How do you think about it in that context where you're also kind of reaching out to folks and you're not exactly sure kind of what frame of mind they're going to be in?
What I try to do is my job right now feels like I'm showcasing the work of other people. And I'm showcasing like whether they're academics or practitioners or other journalists, their work about applied behavioral science, either new studies or ways that they've applied it to their business. And so by showcasing other people, it sort of puts me in the role of like a host. Think of what's his name on American Idol as a terrible example. But excuse me. I think my job is sort of to set a tone or create an atmosphere where then the people and the ideas that I'm showcasing can be accepted. So I use my humor. Like I don't necessarily write jokes, but I sort of try to welcome my readers, whether it's in a newsletter or a particular article, and frame for them why I think it's important that this person gets to showcase their ideas for them. Like I try to understand who our audience is, and it's people that are sort of interested in applied behavioral science from a business perspective most often, and try to let them sort of get into my perspective on why what they're about to hear is relevant. And so I sort of use a little humor or self-deprecation, whatever it is, to make them comfortable, so that then when I bring out tonight's first guest. And now, why did I think of American Idol? I should have thought of like Johnny Carson.
I was very curious as to which American Idol host you saw yourself as, more of a Simon Powell, or who were you going for in that analogy?
Simon is the jerk judge. That's not me. I was thinking of what's his name? The guy. He's like everyone thinks
Randy Jackson.
Clark. No, the host of the original first seasons. Thank you. I wasn't comparing myself to him because I don't want to be like him, but that's for some reason what came to mind. I think a better example is like a Letterman or a Carson or whoever your generational touchstone is, but not like necessarily with like the monologues and the sketches, at least not in this context, but more like when you go and sit on the couch and it's like my next guest, and like you're just sort of creating a welcoming, lighter environment. And the stuff we do on people science it's not an academic journal. It's not like rigorous business studies. It's, everything is credible. It's scientifically credible. No one's making any claims that can't be backed up. But the idea is to be more conversational. We used the image of like a dinner party with really smart friends. And so it's sort of like I am acting as the host. Like, come to Jeff's house, leave your shoes at the door, and drop your inhibitions and then suddenly I'm Carson, and I want everything to be like Rat Pack. Hey, Sammy Davis Jr., he's come back from the grave to sing you a song about hell. All right, let's hear it, Sammy.
Yeah, but I mean, so you were talking about what your goal is with people science is, making some of these behavioral science concepts, which might seem a little bit intimidating to folks who aren't necessarily super familiar with the field, and utilizing or using comedy as the vehicle to make it a little bit more comfortable for people and a little bit more relatable for them. So, like in that vein, as far as your book Dollars and Cents with Dan Ariely, what are some of the most important takeaways that you want people, to be able to, absorb and retain after, they read it and put it on the shelf? Because you cover a lot of ground. I mean, things that people can take in their everyday lives and, their budgets, whether it's, mental accounting or, just being cognizant of opportunity costs. What are some of the most important things that you and Dan had in mind that you wanted people to take away from that?
That's a great question, and I think you're right to point out that we present a lot of ideas in the book, and people often, they don't want a lot of ideas, they want a quick takeaway. And I think that one of the reasons why the book worked well, or at least the process ended up working well, it took a long time, was because Dan and I have the similar viewpoint, which is that we don't want people to be overwhelmed. And we present a lot of different biases and a lot of ideas how you can overcome biases, like particularly money, which is stressful. We don't want people to suddenly be overwhelmed, feel like they have to like analyze every thought and try to think about every bias and all the opportunity costs and freak out about budgeting and mental accounting and the pain of paying and all the various things we list, because that's not a healthy way to live. Going through your life and every time you go to Starbucks, wondering if you're affecting your retirement savings. It's just, that's not great. Life is meant to be enjoyed.
It's draining.
But our goal, it's draining, and our goal is to sort of provide this education, provide, if you will, like a palette of colors, and you can paint your own life. God, I'm so gross. But to provide all this information in a way that hopefully resonates with people, like we use stories, and I found readers, the ones that connect with me and give me the feedback, is like there's always some story that people connect with, so that then when they go through their lives, suddenly when they go to get an item on sale, they sort of remember, oh yeah, Jeff and Dan pointed out that because of relativity, this shirt that's marked down 40% is actually, I shouldn't just go for it because it's on sale. And slowly but surely things will sort of seep in. And if you have specific spending problems, like you spend too much of your discretionary spending every week, or you spend too much on food, like we have suggestions and ways that you can sort of create systems. But I'll often say, I don't believe you can change human nature, but hopefully if we understand our human nature through books like what Dan and I wrote and his peers have written and what others have written, if you understand that human nature, then we can take advantage of our human nature instead of having other people take advantage of us. And that's the big thing that we want to provide is an awareness, so that at a minimum you're aware of when others are sort of trying to trick you. And perhaps more than that, you can be so aware that you can create your own systems to improve your spending and savings behavior. Sort of a self-transparency, if you will.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I think I've read all of Dan's books, and they're all very enjoyable. He's a funny guy, but I feel like partnering with you added a certain comedic element and a levity to everything that just made it very relatable to people. And you're relating it specifically back to other comedians like Seinfeld, like his bit about helmets, about how we didn't choose to avoid these head cracking lifestyles that we've decided for ourselves. We just invented little plastic hats that'll allow us to continue along with those head cracking lifestyles. And relating it back to financial helmets like credit cards and auto pay and payment plans and e-wallets, things that will allow us to like not really pay now but pay later. So it just the pain of paying is reduced. I laughed out loud when I read that because I'm telling you, for the last time, is one of my favorite pieces of stand-up.
Yeah, you know what's interesting is I space now on how you. I think you said relatable, and oftentimes when people think about comedy and the uses of comedy outside of just doing stand-up, they overlook that really what it does is it makes people relatable. Like the book Dollars and Cents, it's not like a joke every 2 lines. The point is to sort of have a sense of humor about oneself and about what you're saying, so that it becomes a little more human. I don't trust anybody that doesn't have a sense of humor. And I know this is not a political podcast, so we won't veer into that. But I really have, if you look at some of the most sort of successful and trustworthy public figures, whatever you think about their politics, Jon Stewart, Rachel Maddow, even Barack Obama, like a lot of why people connect with them was because they had a sense of humor about themselves, and that allowed people to then listen to their message, which wasn't necessarily always hilarious, but it just gave that accessibility.
So you've got so you've got a number of kind of things going on right now, right? I mean, so I feel like I see like a new edition of Dollars and Cents coming out every other week or something like that in a different language, a different country, and editing People Science, and I think still performing as well. Some most recently at Action Design DC.
Boom!
How about that? So yeah, I mean, if maybe you can give us kind of like a little update on just sort of where, what the next steps are for you for the book, for People Science, if people want to come see your stand-up, if they're, anything like that.
Well, since we are coworkers, I mean, I'll just be honest, I spend 110% of my time making sure that People Science is the best it can be, and I do nothing else. I have 2 kids, but I haven't seen them since I got hired.
You're not even here right now talking to us.
This whole podcast was actually just a sting operation to make sure that you were doing a job. So,
well, I am. I've mentioned People Science the requisite number of times. I still do stand up, not as much as I would like. I'd love to do it, but it's a young man's hustle, if you will, and it's not necessarily healthy to do it as much as I used to. I mean, People Science right now, honestly, is my main focus. I love the other things that sort of come along with it, which is talking about behavioral science and whether it's helping people specifically learn about their financial decision making, or more broadly, the stuff we do on People Science about like employee engagement and loyalty and habits and rewards, like all of that. Like behavioral science can do so much good, and I'm a big advocate on the site and in my talks in general about making sure that as this field grows, we're guided by an ethics, that behavioral science just doesn't become just a tool to help sell more cigarettes, that it becomes ethical and actually helps improve people's lives. And I'm trying to find ways to help sort of spread that message and learn how that can work and make connections amongst, whether it's scientists connecting to people that are running organizations or other networks. I'm trying to figure out how to make that happen. And in the end, if I get a late night TV show where I get to impersonate Johnny Carson, that's fine. Was that an opportunity for me to tell everyone what my Twitter handle is? Was that what you really wanted? You didn't want all that.
Well, we can do plugs and Twitter handle and all that stuff in a minute. I guess one sort of light last question that I kind of would want to get to before we wrap up, and I think you'll have a more interesting answer or a more unique answer, I guess I should say, than a lot of folks because of your background. It's just, we always ask guests on the podcast, their advice for people who are looking to get into behavioral science. And so, the answer is kind of from the gamut, but I'm curious to hear what you would say to that.
I would tell them, I'd steal from a book and say, don't panic. From what's called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I actually didn't, until I thought of the phrase, I didn't remember it was from the book, but this sort of draws from my showbiz experience too. Behavioral science is growing and growing rapidly. There are more and more chief behavioral officers being hired, and there's more and more interest in it. And if you're sort of just getting into the field, it can feel like it's racing ahead of you. And this is true in show business too. People are getting opportunities. Oh my God, I'm missing out. Like, don't panic. Just focus on yourself and your studies and whatever your field is. And when you become an expert and you become someone who has something to contribute, whether that's like you've done a great research study or you're running an organization or whatever I've managed to fuse together as knowing humor and writing and knowledge, whatever that is. When you have your thing that you do well, you will find your place in the field. I can sense that when I meet younger people entering the field that are sort of, I want to get my PhD, and they're worried that by the time they get out, everything is going to be gone, right? There'll be no more work. Everyone will figure it all out. Don't panic.
That's great, comforting advice for everyone, I think.
Don't panic!
Shouting it in someone's face at the top of your lungs.
So yeah, maybe we're at the time here where we can do, where folks can kind of find and follow you and the stuff that you're working on.
Peoplescience.com is my primary residence. You can also track me down on Twitter at Jeff Kreisler, Kreisler. BS, that's my sort of behavioral one, and then I have it without the BS, which is everything that's political and opinionated and not appropriate for work. Like the people science is my main thing. Like I want to put together I want to combine my experience putting together tours with putting together what we call people science table talks, which are little touring roundtable, more fun than most roundtables that bring together academics and practitioners, and like we really get specific and local about how behavioral science can help people and organizations improve things. And just, peoplescience.com. Peoplescience.com. I've mentioned it enough now. You should also buy my book, Dollars and Cents. And if you happen to run an organization with a budget, yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely everybody.
Peoplescience.com.
Definitely everybody go check out the books, Get Rich Cheating. Very important to note that it is a parody because it does preach to be jealous, be corrupt, lie, cheat, and steal, then give yourself a bonus and deny, deny, deny. So certainly important to point out to people that this is a parody book, but Dollars and Cents, not a parody book, something that Jeff obviously just wrote with Dan Ariely and is fantastic. I'm actually only just getting over not having Donna Summer songs stuck in my head anymore because there were at least two She Works Hard for the Money jokes in Dollars and Cents.
Yeah, we there's a big backstory behind that, but I feel like I've already wasted your listeners' time enough, so I won't give them the backstory behind that. Listen, if you guys want to do this again and have me give real answers, I'm happy to do it anytime. So
I think we should just do another episode that's just the backstory.
just the backstory of everything, without even like the context. Just Jeff, tell us about Donna Summer. Thanks.
Sounds good to me. Yeah, no, thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Jeff. And thank you guys for listening. We'll have probably another Zach's Corner. If you haven't checked that out yet, you should check those out. So Zach, who is our co-host today, also producer of the show, does a little write-up and kind of gives his take on everything. So you should check that out as well. And yeah, we will talk to you next time. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Jeff. They can't see you waving.
Thank you for listening. That concludes this edition of Action Design Radio, hosted by Eric Johnson and Zarak Khan. All podcast episodes are available for download on SoundCloud, YouTube, and iTunes. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Special thanks to Morgan Bortz for design, and as always, we would like to recognize Steve Wendell, founder of the Action Design Network. I am your producer and audio engineer, Zach Simon. For more cutting-edge behavioral science content, visit action-design.org. Once more, that is action-design.org. There, you can sign up for our newsletter and find an in-person event happening near you. We have chapters in over a dozen cities in the United States, plus Toronto. Also, on our website, you can find additional notes and links regarding the topics discussed in today's episode. Once again, thank you for tuning in, and we will see you again soon.